Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Casual Chats. I am Patricia, and I'm here with Arun.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about something that I've never heard of before. So we're talking about Blinky Bill, which originally was based off of a children's book series that came out in the 1930s, but eventually got itself an animated series and a string of movies. And we're going to be talking about one specific movie. We're going to be talking about Blinky Bill, the Mischievous Koala from 1992.
Yeah, so to give everyone a bit of backstory about my experience with Blinky Bill, so this was a show that was done by ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and so it's based off a book series from Blinky Bill, and so which what we imagine, a lot like Arthur, he looked very different in the books, and so they had to clean him up to give him a bit of a different image. So in this variation of Blinky Bill, I guess you could say, is that this was introduced to me via Cartoon Network, and so this was a so people can look at it and say, oh, this was a Cartoon Network show. No, it wasn't. It was a show on ABC from Australia, and then it was then rebroadcast in Europe on Cartoon Network. And so whether it actually aired in America, I'm not entirely sure.
I've never seen it.
I don't think it ever did. But so this is Patricia's first time seeing Blinky Bill, the Mischievous Koala. So we originally saw it back in the 90s when it was then on Cartoon Network at the time, and then they re-aired the movie because I think it was the movie, and then I think after that the TV series came out after that.
Okay.
So that's sort of how it got its start. And so the idea is that Blinky Bill is this a mischievous kid who is a koala, and he lives amongst all his friends within Green Patch. And so what happens is a bunch of bandits come in and basically knock down all their trees, and obviously to steal the trees there to use the wood. And so Blinky Bill then realizes that his mother has not appeared, and after they knocked all the trees down and all the animals escape. So he goes on an adventure to go find his mother, and also to find out basically what happened to the trees, and to get even with the hunters who effectively the loggers who got rid of the trees. And so I mean, again, like some of the other movies that we've watched in this in this month, it's a pretty basic story, but in regards to getting the prime parts of a movie correct, let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Let's give this movie its due to start off with. This is one of the very first movies that I remember watching where it gave us a live action setting, but then put animation on the top of it. Which you think that they would start off with a song number. You think they would give us something that is relevant to the plot of the story, anything like that. But it's not. It's just about a bunch of good looking girls. But really doesn't make much sense to the story really that we end up getting. It's just it must be a well-known Australian song, I guess, maybe, but in regards to the context of the story, it makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense at all. Yeah, it's very weird to have this juxtaposition between the live action stuff and the animation stuff. Now, it doesn't play it as well as something like Roger Rabbit, where it actually is pretty consistent with having live action and animation mixed in. It's almost as just as haphazard and sloppy compared to all the other ones that try to ride on the success of Roger Rabbit. I mean, it's almost like a Rockadoodle situation in which they only sprinkle in some of the live action stuff toward the beginning and toward the end, and then they don't follow it up afterwards. Out of context, it's just what? Yeah, it doesn't really gel with what's going to be happening throughout the story.
Yeah, and also in regards to all the other songs in this soundtrack, I mean, if anything, they're just kind of cutaway songs. If anything, they're not really part of the integral story. If anything, there's a song about frogs. And it's just the fact that they're just there singing, and it's they're getting a singing lesson, if anything. But it's nothing to do with the actual song of the show.
No,
it's not anything to do with the movie, effectively.
No, not really. I mean, they did this.
There's Old Dogs Go to Heaven that has the big lipped alligator moment, and then this is the baby frog moment, I guess you could say.
Well, I mean, there was actually a frog moment in Thumbelina where you have the mama frog singing about her sons, and one of them just so happened to have a massive crush on Thumbelina. So even that has much more of a relevance to the plot than this one.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, marry the mole has more of a relevance to the plot than this one does.
It does, yeah. That's pretty sad.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, the songs in this are sort of a mismatch, with this. And so the one thing that I think, which again going back to, is the sort of like this, you have like this animation on top of like live action things that are going on. But I mean, it sort of kind of feels weird because you think that the villains of this would actually be it'd be more impactful if they were live action, but they're not. They're cartoons.
Yeah, I think they just put in the live action stuff just because Roger Rabbit did it and it looked really cool. So let's just put that in there. And then they realized, oh wait, we can't implement the live actors into the animation because we don't have the budget for it. So let's just include the live action stuff in there because it makes it more realistic, and let's just leave it like that, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the characters in this movie are pretty stock. I mean, like, even Blinky Bill himself, unfortunately, ends up being kind of like a bit of a stock character in a way. Like, he's like Dennis the Menace. He's like...
which Dennis the Menace?
Either. I mean, like, he could, take from any of either the British or the American version, really. And, he's just this mischievous kid who, like, has no boundaries. And, obviously, you have this, sort of like... thing that happens in movies where like one parent is missing, whether it's the mother or the father, and you have no idea where they are, and unfortunately, like, it's just this one parent has to take care of like Blinky Bill, and obviously Mrs. Koala just kind of like struggles to kind of like maintain like her doing stuff herself, and then obviously maintaining this kid as well.
Yeah, and then they try to put in the backstory like towards the first act where after the events happen where Blinky is just like completely lost, and it looks like he kind of has like amnesia, or maybe he's just like really traumatized with what happened. But you have this other character, Mr. Wombat, who recollects on everything that he was, where he was just a troublemaking character who skipped school and did a lot of mischief, and he was always really disobedient to his mother. And then when he realizes what he done, then he starts getting really, really upset, and then he starts caring about his mom and wanting to find out if they can find her, and then they can't find her, and so they decide, oh well, maybe she's still in the tree where she was at, and then they go over to where the loggers live.
Yeah, it's sort of like the way that they did Red Sonja, like where the Arnold Schwarzenegger version, not the new version that's recently been announced, and like it's just like, oh, they just kind of go over the old ground, and then he's like, oh hey, now you are Red Sonja. If anything, like it's we already seen what Blinky Bill is like. We didn't really need a narration of like it all happening again.
Well, I mean, to be fair, when did this movie come out, before the TV series or after?
I think the TV series came after the movie.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I guess maybe if you're not familiar with the book, maybe this is your way of getting your introduction.
But we were already introduced like the fact that Blinky Bill was a mischievous kid, before Mr. Wombat kind of like gave us that exposition again.
I guess that's
if
true.
You will.
Yeah.
Like we didn't need it all happening again. We saw it before.
Yeah.
It doesn't need explaining again. Like like the whole like not remembering Blinky Bill, not remembering who he was. Like that whole bit was a bit unnecessary, really.
I mean, unless you were to play it for traumatic effects, like he was just like really confused because he just went through something so traumatic, like his home was destroyed and he doesn't know where his mom was.
If anything, like it would have been better, not as an amnesia thing. It would have been better doing it as a pep talk. If anything, like Mr. Wombat like finds Blinky Bill and says, "Look, you've seen what the responsibilities that you now carry, and now you have to help us get to." By the way, that's what happens. Like in this is what kind of weird because the movie kind of like doesn't really align with the TV series. In the TV series, they sort of kind of like rewrite the movie, where saying like Blinky Bill led the forest animals to the new green patch, and which isn't what happened in the movie. Like if anything, like Blinky Bill just saves his mom, and that's about it. Like so even I think they realized that the movie premise was so bad that they had to like say, oh okay, well, let's let's leave the movie behind, and let's just go on with the TV series, and let's just rewrite the TV series.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What are your thoughts on the TV series? Because I mean, I've never seen a single episode.
I mean, like they wanted to really get this thing going. Like, Cartoon Network put it on repeat multiple times. They even did like a thing. They did like a marathon of episodes as well. Like they did like a special Blinky Bill thing. Like they must have been so happy to capture this IP. They must have like repeat it over and over and over again. But I mean, to be honest with you, at the time, like there was already the cartoons, like the Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo's, X's Laboratory, like various other shows. Had already even the What a Cartoon Show was already in full swing at this point and was putting out other things. And Blinky Bill was just kind of like put in the middle of it, really. Like it didn't really have a chance to take off.
Interesting. I mean, it almost kind of like feels like this should have been released like around pre-Cartoon Network, like when they were still releasing a lot of the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons before they started creating their own original
Well, I think
stuff.
because they probably went as the Australian Broadcast Corporation got this IP and thought, oh hey, let's run with it, let's just see if it goes anywhere. And they probably repeated it to death, and then unfortunately it just died. So like it didn't really have a chance to kind of take off. They must have just put it out for the UK audience, thinking, well, they love all the Australian soap operas, so maybe that the Australian cartoon shows as well. I don't know. Maybe that was the mentality behind it. I don't know.
I guess that's true because, I mean, I believe that some of the Australian soap operas that were coming out in the UK were starting to become popular, like Neighbours, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Neighbours was actually...
Oh, yeah, there was tons. There was Neighbours, there was Sons and Daughters, there was, oh, good grief, there was loads of them, the Australian soap operas that came out.
You told me about when you were growing up about that show that was originally from Australia about the dog, right?
Oh, yeah, there was that. Well, I thought it was Australian, but it was Canadian.
Oh, it was Canadian. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. Okay, yeah, that's a different story.
Yeah, but there was a number of Australian shows that were broadcast by ABC in Australia that did actually make it way to the UK because quite a few Australians actually were living here at the time.
Okay.
So I mean, like there was that. So, but I guess they thought Blinky Bill probably would take off in the UK on Cartoon Network, but unfortunately it didn't. So
anyway, yeah. So again, let's continue on with this. So yeah, I mean, essentially we have Blinky Bill and his friends. He has several friends actually, but unfortunately you're not going to remember a single one of them.
This is the thing, like, I had to look up, like, all the names of the characters because they don't really announce them. Besides Nutsy, who is, like, the female character, like, the female Blinky Bill, I guess you could say, like, who has, and again, we're in the 90s, so obviously you gotta have the spunky female character who, like, thinks she knows what's best and, but eventually gets herself into trouble and then Blinky Bill has to come to the rescue and...
well, that's Marcia, where she believes that she knows everything and that she's the spunky one. Nutsy is the one who's kind of, like, a little bit timid and she's alongside with Blinky Bill and wanting to help him out. But yeah, I mean, you have like a whole bunch of like other characters that are alongside with Blinky Bill, like Nutsy, as we mentioned before, and Marcia, as we mentioned before. There's also Splooge, who's the kangaroo. Splodge, yeah, Splodge.
Splooge. Okay. Way to insult a character. Yeah, let's compare him to Seaman. Like, come on.
I meant to say Splodge.
Yeah, then there's Marcia, who is the... Marcia, who is the... man, you look at me, we're mispronouncing names. And then you got Flap the Platypus, Mrs. Koala, who's Blinky's mother, and then you have Wombo, who is...
that's Mr. Wombat.
Mr. Wombat, who doesn't like being called Wombo, by the way, and that's a running joke that goes on throughout this entire movie. I think it happens in the TV series as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so, I mean, you have all of these, like, characters that are, alongside with Blinky Bill in the forest, but again, you don't really remember them because they're just so one-note.
Yeah, Miss Magpie's, like, the Shrek teacher, like, she's pretty much every other teacher that was there in the 90s at the time. Like, it's funny because Miss Magpie doesn't really get much development until we get to the TV series, funny enough. And it's funny because there's, like, you get to see different sides of Miss Magpie after that. Like, I remember the one episode I remember in Blinky Bill's when they were trying to find out, like, who got, like, the poison berries or something like that, and, who fed them to, like, a particular character. And, like, Blinky Bill's there, like, playing bad cop, saying, like, where were you, Miss Magpie, when this thing was going on? And it's like, she says, I don't know where, I wasn't, in the school at the time. I was, like, flying over and stuff like that. Like, it was funny to, like, see the other side of Miss Magpie saying, like, she doesn't like being interrogated herself, when crimes are going on in New Green Patch. Mm-hmm. So it was good to see, like, other sides of Miss Magpie. But in this movie, there's only one side of it that you see, which is the strict teacher, which we see in every other typical 90s movie.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, so you basically, like, the first two acts, you have them in the forest, and they're trying to, pick themselves up after everything was destroyed. And then you have the third act where they finally go over to the logger's home to try to see if,
yeah, but they drag this out so much,
they
don't
do.
they?
They
Oh,
do.
good
It
grief.
is so slow. It is really slow.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, our villains aren't that interesting.
Yeah, like you would think that these loggers would be really interesting. It's like, yeah, these are the ones who cut down the trees, and they were the ones who destroyed all the homes of these animals. It's like,
If anything, they're just like a lamer version of Jasper and Horace from 101 Dalmatians. Like it's just
You're
this-
right,
who have
actually.
Australian accents. Actually, one's American for some strange reason.
yeah, that is really.
That's weird. Why is one American?
I guess.
It's Australia.
I guess maybe he moved to Australia.
I don't know.
Maybe
but
for
it's just-
work. I don't know.
Yeah. By the way, for those of you wondering, like, wait, this is Australia. Why are they all armed with guns? Keep in mind, this was before, the killings that took place. I think in 1996. I think it was, and then they did the whole, the thing where they took all the guns away.
Yeah.
In Australia, and so that was before that. So yeah, if you're wondering why everyone seems to be armed to the teeth in this movie, it's because there was a lot of guns going on around in Australia at the time, and it wasn't until they had where everyone hand them in after that shooting in 1996 that they actually did that actually happened. So if anyone's wondering if you are watching this movie for whatever reason, that's the reason why they have guns.
I mean, who knows? Maybe there are people in Australia who are tuning in and who have memories of Blinky Bill. Who knows?
Yeah, they probably are, and but here's the thing, as far as I'm aware, it was there was a book series, there was a TV series, there was a movie, Blinky Bill was a big deal at the time.
Yeah,
so.
and apparently it still was, because there was actually a reboot movie that came out in 2015.
Yeah, there was. We haven't watched that, by the way,
No,
because
we have
that's way
not.
past our time.
Yeah,
so,
we haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I haven't even seen the TV series, so again, I'm just going into the movie, so I know nothing about the TV series.
Yeah, but unfortunately, in regards to Blinky Bill, I mean, so far, the story is stock, the villains are the characters are stock, and
and even the premise is stock, because there were a lot of 90s movies about the environment and taking care of it and being destroyed and trying to, get back to normal and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you had Fern Gully and the Last Rainforest, you had Once Upon a Forest. I mean, there were several.
I think Captain Planet was pretty big at that time as well.
Yeah, Captain Planet and the Planeteers was out at that point, so yeah.
Even Sonic the Hedgehog was even doing a lighter version of the environmental story. No, not the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Sorry, Sonic Satam.
Sonic Satam, yeah. Where you have basically a post-apocalyptic world where, Dr. Robotnik has taken over everything, and now you have Sonic and his rebellious group basically trying to stop him. So yeah, I mean, this was a thing that was going on at the time, where you have a lot of these characters who are trying to fight off against the evil people who are destroying the environment. So yeah, to see Blinky Bill doing something like this, it's kind of like a dime a dozen more than just a novel concept.
Yeah, it is, and which kind of makes it kind of sad, really, because you look at Blinky Bill and you got this mischievous koala bear who is young, probably just can't be controlled, and is just just so gets into all sorts of trouble and all sorts of mischief and stuff like that. And to be honest with you, that's sort of a character that people some kids in the 90s could relate to in some way.
Yeah, because the 90s was a decade where it had a lot of mischievous characters. Bart Simpson, you had Kevin McAllister from Home Alone, who kind of started it, where a lot of kids from that were in a lot of TV shows and movies were kind of timid, or were kind of blank slates that you can insert yourself in there. But yeah, Kevin McAllister from Home Alone kind of started it, and then everybody else afterwards tried to cash in on it.
I think Bart Simpson, I think, and also you had Eric Cartman as well, he's heavily controversial and from today. But I think the idea was during the 90s there was just this where people were sick of things like the Cosby Show and Full House and all these warm nuclear family sort of kind of shows that have good morals and things like that. They wanted to see something rebellious, and Bart Simpson, I think, obviously took that skateboard and rides that wave as far as it'll go. And then there was all these other rebellious characters, whether it's Dennis the Menace or whether it was Blinky Bill or whether it was various other Sonic the Hedgehog, I guess you can say, when he got his spunk, where there were just so many characters who were just wanted to like just say no to like the normal culture and wanted to just create like this revolution that we saw in the 90s. And so Blinky Bill, it's funny because like you would have thought that a character like Blinky Bill would have stood out in the crowd, amongst all the other rebels, but he doesn't. Like if anything, he ends up kind of like becoming just another one, if anything. Now that you look back at it, 30 years later. So,
yeah, and again, I think that because we never got it in America, I mean, this is just an anomaly. It's like, yeah, you would think that something like this would be really cool to, bring into it. But, again, yeah, I think that for us Americans, we were like swamped with all this kind of stories and all these kind of characters. So, I think that, unless, of course, if you were, a specific type of, kid who grew up with like this particular show, this is kind of like a concept that probably would have been strange because it's like, oh, it takes place in Australia and it feels like it's kind of odd. But yeah, I mean, to us, it's kind of like it's nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, I mean, like, I really wish there was more that we could add to Blinky Bill, because, I mean, I'm sure if we watched the TV series, we've probably got a better idea of, like, our characters that we have in this, but unfortunately, everything here is just so flat, and,
I guess it makes a lot of sense, because I guess you would kind of call it, like, the pilot to the TV show. It's like, okay, this is a story where we can, like, introduce the characters and introduce the fact that, they're going through this situation. So, again, it's kind of like one of those, like, TV movies that you have like as the pilot, and then afterwards it just spins off, kind of like where Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, where that had like a pilot that was like a 45-minute movie where you got to introduce like all the characters. You got to introduce about how did Blue go into Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends in the first place, how all the other characters that would be in the home, and Mac, where he was going through, where he eventually had to let Blue go over there. Other examples, I mean, even like some of the Disney movies were doing that. Like, we were talking about Return of Jafar, where, that started off as like a direct-to-video movie. And then eventually that direct-to-video movie was the pilot for the Aladdin TV series. Same thing that happened with Buzz Lightyear Star Command, where, they had a TV movie, which we talked about in Pixmix, if you want to go check that out, where that was a pilot to the TV series. So, yeah, I would think that maybe the reason why that, the way that the characters are, where they're just so flat and the storyline is just not that great, is because maybe they knew from the get-go that it was a TV, this was going to be a pilot for a TV series. But yeah, I mean, that doesn't exactly get you excited to saying, I want to watch more of this. It just makes me think like, okay, this is just like a one and done deal, because I already have other things that I can tune into, like Captain Planet and the Planeteers, or Once Upon a Forest, or Fern Gully and the Last Rainforest. If I wanted to see cute animals in a forest setting where it's getting destroyed, then I can watch those movies. Or if I want to see people who are trying to protect the environment, again, I would see Captain Planet. So, it's not like I was starved for this kind of content.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the audience, I think, during 1992 actually agree with you, Patricia, because in the box office that it made, and by the way, to be fair, this movie was only released in theaters in Australia. So, like, we only got Australian box office to go on it. And according to this, it was 1.9 Australian dollars.
Oh, God.
Which translates to $1.2 million in the United States. However, if you mark it up for inflation, it did make about $2.3 million in sales.
Which is nothing.
So, which is, yeah, I guess. But keep in mind, like, it's like, if this was, like, released to, like, worldwide and it only made, like, like $2.3 million, I mean, like, you can probably understand it was a colossal failure. But the fact that it was only released by ABC Films, by, like, and only released in, like, probably, like, a handful of cinemas, like, probably in Sydney and Brisbane, and, like, various other places. I mean, I don't know how many theatre complexes were probably in Australia at the time in 1992. Probably not very many, I probably imagine. But at the same time, like, making, I don't know how successful 1.9 million Australian dollars would have been back in 1992. Anyone, Australians in the comment section who can enlighten us if that's actually a successful, outing for an Australian film in Australia, I would like to know.
Yeah, please let us know. Yeah.
So, yeah. No,
yeah, I mean, even like the podcast that we did earlier about Happily Ever After, I mean, even that was like a major bomb in the box office. But, that made like $3.3 million. And that was released in multiple countries, like the Philippines and the United States and various other ones.
Well, if anything, that's worse, because it released in more territories across the world, and yet it did worse than Blinky Bill, if you think about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least with the Blinky Bill's excuse, it was released in Australia only in theaters, and the way that other people were able to watch it was on TV. So I guess that's to be excused, but still, it's like, yeah, $1.2 million is not very good.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's all we can really say about Blinky Bill, really. Like, it was quite an interesting experiment, I guess you could say, to see if an Australian product could actually, take off in the UK or in Europe, I guess. And I guess while it had some sort of modest success on Cartoon Network, it wasn't enough for us to kind of, remember back on, on the lineup of whether, Blinky Bill was part of your childhood or not. I mean, all I know is that it was there. But I gotta be honest with you, when you think about Cartoon Network, you think about Johnny Bravo, you think about Dexter's Laboratory, you think about the Powerpuff Girls, you think about various other cartoons. Heck, you even think of Centurions and all the Hanna-Barbera cartoons and Scooby-Doo and everything like that. That wasn't even our era. That got rebroadcast during the 90s era. Those were the things that we remember from the Cartoon Network run at that time. And things like Blinky Bill, they're sort of just kind of like anomalies that were just happened to be experiments that Cartoon Network were trying at the time, but unfortunately never took off.
Yeah, but that's in the UK. I know it's really big in Australia. I know that the show was really popular in Australia. I think that the reboots and all that kind of stuff was really popular in Australia. So it makes a lot of sense why this is like an Australian icon. But yeah, everywhere else around the world, it's kind of like an anomaly. Like for me, I never even knew it existed until Aaron introduced me to it. So yeah, it was non-existent in America, and it was just kind of like a one and done deal in the UK. So yeah, for anybody who is in Australia who grew up with this and are probably shaking your head saying but these are classics. I mean, everybody knows about Blinky Bill. So yeah, I mean, you have to keep in mind that this is from our perspective, and we would love to know in the comments about your perspective on
it's kind of funny because I think that the UK, I think they made a really good go, whether it was Cartoon Network, whether it was Nickelodeon, whether it was the Children's Channel, or whether it was very other ones, where they tried to make a good go of bringing other international products into the UK. I remember when the Children's Channel were doing anime, and then all of a sudden Cartoon Network started doing Toonami, and so they started bringing anime shows in, and then we got a collection of other shows that came in from in Europe and starting from Germany, and even some of the Eastern European cartoon shows were starting to kind of come in, and so there was at least an effort, I think, here. I speak to someone who grew up with cartoon shows in the UK, from the 80s and the 90s. There was an effort, I think, to bring in a good cosmopolitan of foreign flavors, I think, into that. But obviously, American animation just dominated the airways, I think, at that time. And it's funny because you had American shows that never even entered in the UK. For example, we never got My Gym Partner's a Monkey here in the UK. We never got that show.
Oh, okay.
And so it's quite crazy that America was just so full of animation at the time, to the point where it was sort of kind of filling out. There was no way for foreign shows, unless you were really special, to kind of get into the eyeballs of American viewers at the time. So.
Yeah, and as for America, a lot of the shows that we got acquired was some of the British shows in the 80s. We got in Danger Mouse and Count Duckula from the UK.
And the Avenger Penguins.
Yeah, we got in that in America. And then around the 90s, we started getting a lot more Canadian shows. We got in a lot of Japanese anime. That stuff was starting to, blow up, massively when we got Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And various other ones. And then for Canada, I mean, we got in Reboot. We got in the Donkey Kong Country animated series. We got in a lot of the Nelvana stuff, like Beetlejuice the animated series and various other programs. And then I mean, even with the UK stuff, I mean, we got in a handful of stuff, but yeah, I would say
but in regards to foreign shows, you have to be a phenomenon. There's a reason why the Pokemon animated series got the push that it did. If it wasn't for the cards and if it wasn't for Nintendo, I think I think Pokemon would just be another forgotten show. But the fact that it ended up being the thing that it was,
well, I mean, also the video games were also huge.
Well, yeah, there was that too. But what I'm saying is that you needed to kind of to be a foreign entity, you needed to be something to begin with in order to have a platform. Right. And Pokemon had that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So.
And of course, video games were hugely popular, and Canada was doing a lot of the video game cartoons. And they did the Donkey Kong Country animated series. They did do Mega Man. They did do the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. And
yeah, but the less we say about those things, the better. better.
Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, we were not starved for like content from other countries. But yeah, Blinky Bill, we never got it.
Yeah,
Never did.
Maybe after watching the movie, maybe that was for the best.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, I know that he was an icon in Australia, but yeah, I think in America he wouldn't have stood out whatsoever.
Yeah.
All right then. So yeah, I mean, do we rank this?
I mean, like, here's the thing about this, like, it's unfortunately, I mean, if we forget that, this is Blinky Bill, let's just say this is just like another animated movie. I mean, does it really stick out from like anything else that was there in the 90s? Unfortunately, the answer is no.
No.
It did some interesting experiments. I'll just say for that, but I mean, like, that's an experiment, and like, I guess you could say you can get into Blinky Bill's emotional journey, but unfortunately, like, it gets sidetracked so many times in this movie, and like, you sort of kind of lose your way quite a bit in this, and it makes you wonder like what's important and what isn't. And so unfortunately, like, just with regards to the narrative, the songs also don't really fit all that well as well.
I completely forgot that there were even songs in this.
Yeah, there was, like, and the characters really aren't all that involved until like the final third as well. So like it doesn't glue very well together, and it looks like they tried to like put in too many stories also as well, like trying to explain our character a bit too much as well, and like it's unfortunately it doesn't work all that great, and so I probably have to say 3 out of 10, I guess I have to say.
Yeah, I would say even 2 out of 10, because I just think that it's
2.5 out of 10.
All right, yeah, 2.5 out of 10, because yeah, like, first and foremost, it's just really slow. Like, it doesn't really get going until we get to like the backstory of Blinky Bill, but even then it's not very interesting. It's just some troublemaking kid who's just rebellious just for the sake of being rebellious. And then you have like a little bit of emotion where he thinks that his mother's dead, but again, that just gets sidetracked so many times, where you have him getting like amnesia, and then him remembering, but then he has to go with the other animals and they're into hiding, and they have to like restart everything all over again, and they lost hope, and then he wants to see if they are gonna follow him towards where the loggers are so they can find out if the mother's in the tree, because she refused to leave until Blinky Bill came back. And then you have that going like really, really slow, and the characters are just not really that fascinating. The songs are pretty much not really memorable in the slightest. And also, the animation where it goes into the whole live action thing, again, it doesn't gel well compared to something like Roger Rabbit, in which it does make a lot of sense while you have animation mixed with the live action stuff. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the characters are stock, the music is instantly forgettable, the animation is just whatever. Yeah, and again, I understand that this was like essentially like a pilot for a TV show, but again, we never got the TV show in America, so I have no connections to this whatsoever. So just watching it on its own, I just find it to be pretty dull and boring. Yeah, I think this might be probably the worst thing that we've seen throughout our lookbacks on all these weird animated movies that we grew up with so far. So yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't a big fan of this one. So yeah, 2 out of 10.
Anyway, well, we've been pretty much through a pretty interesting month, I guess you could say, here in November, and so but now we take ourselves into Christmas.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to Christmas.
So with that Christmas spirit just around the corner, take care everybody, and bye for now.
See you later, everyone.